By now, you probably know Upper Tanana. It's an endangered Diné or Athabascan language, and the state of Alaska sits upon the traditional lands of its speakers. We've talked about the language's speakers, phonetic inventory, and phonology. So now it's time to tackle the morphology, the shape and structure of the words. It's about to get really complex, so I'll try my best to make it understandable. If there's one thing to know about Upper Tanana morphology, it's this.
Verbs have lots of prefixes.
And a suffix. So while English verbs usually just take a single inflectional suffix or something along those lines, Upper Tanana verbs can take a ton of morphemes. Upper Tanana is about as synthetic as they come, meaning verbs take a lot of prefixes and suffixes. These ones are roughly inflectional. These ones are roughly derivational, though it depends, and there are some exceptions in each of the slots. Whether it's fusional or agglutinating is a bit harder to say, since inflectional prefixes tend to be very tightly fused with lots of meanings per morpheme, while derivational prefixes usually serve a single purpose. But because prefixes often overlap to create new meanings that don't exist on their own, I'd say the language leans agglutinating. Now, be warned, I do not understand all of the nuances of Lovick's 14 chapters on verbs alone. I'm just a guy who read a book well above my reading level. Because I cannot possibly summarize 14 chapters in less than 3 minutes, I'll mostly focus on these mandatory slots, most of which are inflectional. Subject and pronominal prefixes can go first. The subject prefix agrees with first and second person pronouns. The pronominal prefix agrees with third person subject pronouns or object pronouns. Third person subject pronouns do not go in the subject slot, which is strange, and it gets so complicated that Lovick's writing another 700-page book just to sort out all that juicy syntax. Mode and conjugation also overlap a lot, because even though they occur as two separate prefixes, conjugation and mode combine to make new tense and aspectual meanings. Mode, by the way, is basically just aspect plus the operative mood, but they're kind of lumped together because they're mutually exclusive and they all occur in the same position, and aspect also occurs in other places. It's a little messy. As for voiced prefixes, they're closest to stems and thus likely the oldest. They're also the most mandatory. This is really oversimplified, but changing these prefixes can make all sorts of productive changes in voice, transitivity, and more. But Upper Tanana isn't just prefixes galore. While verbs are very heavily inflected, nouns are only inflected for possession. If it's family or a body part, you add a glottal stop to the inalienable possessed. And otherwise, you make the syllable heavy so that it is alienable possession. Because nouns are so simple, they're readily incorporated to change verb valency. It's roughly equivalent to replacing I handle the trap with I trap handle. It's one of the many derivational processes in Upper Tanana. You just slap the noun in prefix slot 8. This is all extremely simplified, and I'm already over time, and I left out a lot of stuff, and it's a mess. It just goes to show how hard it is to fit an understudied language into frameworks built around stuff like English and French. But in short, Upper Tanana almost exclusively prefixes verbs with many inflection and lots of derivations too. The grammar is the heart and soul of the verb, not necessarily the sentence alone.